I will make it short and to just have more time for you guys. So Dr. Powers is a Fullerton College English Professor. He's been awarded both Fullerton College Teacher of the Year and Extended Opportunity Program and Services Outstanding Teacher of the Year. So you have the best of the best here. Awesome. He's earned his doctorate in education from UCLA in 2015 and earned the UCLA Alumni Dissertation Scholarship. The rest of his bio is with you in your program, and I'll let you take a look at that. And let's welcome Dr. Powers, please.
So they gave me 2 mics, so I'm going to see. Can you hear me with this one?
Yes. That's right.
Then I'm gonna... Thank you. I'm really grateful to be here. I'm excited to help you as you continue to work towards your academic success. And hopefully we'll have some good learning opportunities and some chance for you to do things. So that's the goal. It's going to be an active learning environment, and we'll try and make sure that you're understanding things. I have a tendency to talk too fast. So if that's the case, I encourage you to raise your hand and ask for help. That's one of the big lessons of our conversation today, is that being smart means asking for help. So, if you don't understand something, or if I'm talking too quickly, which that's something I do because I get so excited, you can just ask me to say something again or ask for clarification at any time. Is that a fair deal? You guys willing to do that?
Yeah.
Great. So, my name, as I mentioned, is Miguel Powers, and I'm excited to be here to share mainly the idea of growth mindset. And some of you may already be familiar with it, and some of you may not. So a simple way to think about it is, this is a graphic that our students made up, and they said having a growth mindset means believing that you can change your intelligence. And that is a really important concept, because when we're struggling, if we don't think we can change our intelligence, it might seem like a good idea to step away, to not engage in that struggle. But when you know that you can change your actual intelligence, then you know that struggle is where the learning takes place. When it's hard, that's an exciting moment, because that's when you're going to learn. If people ask you a question you already know the answer to, you're not learning, you're just showing what you learned before. When people ask you to try and do something you don't know how to do yet, that's when you get better. And the work of going from not being able to do it to doing it, that's what learning is like. So if we recognize that struggle is where the learning takes place, then you can help yourself improve. So I want to give you an opportunity to try something out here. Remember, struggle is where the learning takes place. So some of you, this might seem a little bit of a risk. That's okay. Risk is good in a safe environment like this. That's okay. So on every table, there's a blank piece of paper, or several. So you just pass those out. Everyone needs one sheet. A blank paper with one sheet. And you're going to need something to write with. I think if you didn't have another one, there's a pen in your bag. So you need a paper and a pen. Or something to, pencil is fine. Okay. Write your own name on the paper. So write your name on the paper somewhere. That wasn't the challenging part. Now, I'm going to ask you to find a partner at your table, or if you need to turn to another table so everyone has a partner, you're going to exchange papers in just a second. And then I'm going to, not yet, just a second. And then I'm going to give you a short time to draw your partner. You're going to have 30 seconds to draw your partner. So go ahead and exchange, and I'll tell you when to start. Someone else's paper, everyone has a different paper. You're going to draw whoever's name is on it. Okay, 30 seconds starts now. 30 seconds to draw your partner. more seconds. Okay, now stop. Now give it back to the person you just drew. Give it back their picture. So let's talk about this for a second. Okay. It's always a good sign when it's hard to give people the attention back. That's a good sign. So, how many people said sorry when you gave it back? Felt bad, like, oh, I didn't like my drawing, I feel bad about it, yeah? That's actually what I wanted to find out. Because we often, as adults, when we do this, and there's been research showing this, we feel bad. We want to say, I'm sorry. My drawing isn't good enough. You don't really look like this. But what's interesting is kids, when they do this, they never say sorry. They're like, this is the most amazing drawing ever. Look at it. And the point is, not that they're better artists than you, but they have a better mindset about what they do. They think of it as their best effort and they want to share it with you, and they're not afraid of the judgment. It's often that fear of being judged by our peers or being judged for how well we did at the thing we tried to do that can make it harder to learn. If we have a growth mindset, we know that what we did right there, that was a good effort for where we were, and if we practiced, if we learned new strategies, we'd get better. And if we step outside of that judgment mentality, where we're worried about our peers and more about how we can learn from what we're doing, that's part of having a growth mindset. It's also kind of fun, right? To let yourself be in that space where you can play, where you can be improving without trying to always be judged. Does that make sense? Bless you. So we're going to come back to that. Maybe try that exercise and some other drawing exercises in a little bit. But that was just an exercise to get you started, and also you hopefully met a new person. And they have a self-portrait or another person's portrait they're going to cherish forever because your drawings were good. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. All right. I don't know if I can advance. Okay. So this is the person who shared this activity with me. She learned it from her son and her nephew who were taking drawing classes and how they learned. And so if you look at the one they drew of her on the left, the long one, if you can see, they kind of drew a line and a line. Can you see that? Because they had learned strategies of how to draw. And one of the things they learned is how to frame the face first and then use that structural outline to draw to get the proportions right. That's not something they started knowing, that's something they had learned. And that's what learning looks like, is getting help from other people and learning strategies. Because we don't want to just try hard. Trying hard is good, but trying hard by itself isn't enough. We want to work smarter. And that's some of the things we're going to talk about today. So again, we'll come back to this, and maybe we'll have some people share some ideas of how to draw. So, as we're talking about growth mindset, I want to talk about two words first. We have the word the brain and the word the mind. The brain and the mind. Why do we have two words, do you think? Do they say the same thing or they mean different things? Different. They are different, right? So when we talk about the brain, and I have a little squishy brain here to pass around. Two of them because of the big room. When we talk about the brain, what are we talking about? A physical thing, an organ, right? It's inside your skull. It's made up of millions, billions of cells. It's a physical thing, right? When we talk about the mind, what are we talking about? The content, yeah? It's more of an abstract idea. It's harder. One way to think about it is everything, the actions that the brain does, that's your mind. You're thinking, right? The thinking is your mind. So when we talk about having a growth mindset, it's how you think about your thinking. Right? How you think about your thinking. When we're talking about the brain, we're talking about the physical things. And that brings me to a really big fancy word. Neuroplasticity.
Yeah,
Neuroplasticity. Yes?
it's the nerve in your brain that connects to your spinal cord. That's the main cell.
Excellent. That's really good, thank you. So neuroplasticity is the idea that your physical brain, the thing, changes when you learn new things. We can actually watch people's brains change. So it's not just that you think differently, the physical structure of your brain is different. So I need 2 volunteers. Can I have 2 volunteers? Will you be a volunteer? All right. 1 more? Will you be a volunteer? Come on. Okay. Hold that. I'll just hold that for a second. If you just kind of tuck that in so it's not just there. Okay. So, in your brain, there's a little picture there. You have cells, that's the big thing. And all those cells have branches that grow off of them. And when you learn something new, you make a connection between one cell and another cell. So they're the cells, and this is that connection, right? Let's say your teacher says something and you listen and you write it down. Or you're learning a new cooking recipe and you do it one time. You make a new connection. Does that make sense? But if you haven't done it a lot or studied it, it's pretty easy to forget, right?
Yes.
It doesn't stick, right? You don't make a permanent connection, but, nice to see you for a second. If you study it back and forth, you know what? I'm going to do this a little bit close. Sound effects. Okay. If you study it in class, and then maybe you go home and you study it again at home, right? And then you maybe practice it and you apply it in your real experience and you keep doing that over and over, you're going to make a stronger connection. Does that make sense? Yes. And then, when something happens, you won't forget it. Right? I'm really pulling. You guys pull. Go ahead. All right. That's what happens when you study and learn something. Good job. Oh, 1 second. There's a little bracelet. I'll tell what those are. So thank you very much. So neuroplasticity is the physical changes in your brain. When you learn something and you study it, you make that connection. So, for example, if you learn a foreign language, some of you are learning English as another language, right? Yeah. And if you study it, you start to learn it, right? What happens if you stop practicing? You forget it. Do you go back to 0 though? No. You don't practice, you don't use it, it's not as active, but it's still there. That's why you can go back to it and you don't start where you in the beginning. You start somewhere in between, right? So you built it, you don't practice, it goes down, but it never goes back to 0. Because, and this is really exciting, the neurons, or the cells that fire together, wire together. That's the way. It's on your first page of your handout for us. You guys have that. It says the neurons that fire together, wire together. Yeah. Oh, so 1 second, the handouts will be coming shortly. Perfect. So, neuroplasticity is how your brain changes when you learn something new. So, I'm sorry, you don't have the handout yet. It's still coming. Neuroplasticity. Now, I've said neuroplasticity a bunch of times, right? Yes. So what's happening right now? You're making a connection in your brain. Because you've heard me say it. That line's going back and forth, and you're going to get those neurons to fire together and wire together, and you'll remember what neuroplasticity means. They did a study with a bunch of jugglers. They took 2 groups of people. One group could juggle, or nobody could juggle, and they taught one group to juggle, and the other group did it. and they watched what happened in their brain. And what they found was the people who learned to juggle, their brain changed. They could see it. The part of their brain that has to do with juggling spatially grew. And then they stopped practicing, it shrunk a little, but it never went back. Neuroplasticity. When we understand neuroplasticity and how your brain changes, then we can think differently about how your mind works. So let's say two people encounter a challenge, okay? You get to something that's hard. You're in class and it's hard. You're at work and it's something hard. And someone with a growth mindset says, you know what I need to do? I need to get more effort and help. And because they don't just give up, they get more effort and help, they actually do well. They get a better grade on that test. They do well at their job, right? You know what that does? It makes them believe more that they have a growth mindset. What about the other person? The person said, you know what, I can't do this. I'm just not a math person, or this is too hard. They have a fixed mindset. So what do? They don't try very hard, right? They don't get help. They don't go get help in what they're working on. So they work less, and guess what happens? They don't do very well. You know what that proves to them? See, I told you I wasn't good at this. But it wasn't the good ability, it was the effort that made the difference. Whatever language you might be learning, nobody was born speaking it. People who grew up in a country where that's their first or even only language, they weren't born speaking it either. They had to build that pathway. They had to build the neural pathway. If someone can do something and you can't, that doesn't mean they're smarter than you. It means they've done something you haven't done yet. They had to learn it first too. In fact, if someone can do something you can't do yet, that's exciting because that's someone who can help you. They already know how to do it. If you see someone in class and they're doing great next to you, you should say, can you help me get better? How do you study? Because it was about the effort. They weren't born knowing whatever it is, they had to learn it. So can you learn how to learn from good learners? And maybe you're a good learner in one subject and struggling in another. Find someone who already knows how to do it. The exciting thing is everything you're learning in college, people already know how to do. Other people around you. The teacher, the tutors, your classmates, your friends. Other people already know, so go get help. There's no sense in working it all by yourself, right? So they did an interesting study. You see the little picture there? They hooked students up to a machine and they watched their brains. That'd be weird, right? They watched their brains and they had them take a test. And they would ask them some basic knowledge things. Like, what's the capital of Australia? And then they would answer it, and if they got it right, there was like a green little screen and a little bing, it was happy. If they got it wrong, there was like a red screen and an annoying buzzer, not happy. And they watched what happened to their brains. And then they showed them the right answer if they got it wrong. And they watched what happened to their brains. And the people at the end, they took off the machines and they walked outside and said, surprise, we're going to have a retest. Remember all those questions you got wrong? Here's another chance to try again. Remember, they gave them the answer, and if it was wrong, they gave them the right answer, but they didn't know there was going to be a test. So they had a choice to learn it just because they wanted to learn it or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The people with the fixed mindset did not learn it. The people with the growth mindset did. Nobody knew there was going to be a test. But the growth mindset people, when they got a chance to learn something, they were interested in learning. And they watched their brains, remember? What they saw was, after I got a wrong answer, if I had a growth mindset, my memory part of my brain clicked off. Oh, I want to learn the new answer. This is exciting. I want to learn. If I had a fixed mindset, my emotions went off, and I was just angry at being wrong. And then I didn't learn. So on the surprise test, everyone who had a growth mindset did better than everyone who had a fixed mindset. Right? Because it was about their effort. They tried to learn when they had the chance. They weren't doing it for a test. They didn't know there was a test. It was just because they wanted to learn. Having a growth mindset changes how your brain responds to challenge. You'll learn better because you believe and know to change your effort. One way to think about this, a simple way, is if you think your brain is like your height, you can't change it, right? I wanted to play in the NBA. A lot of things kept me from that, but one of them is I'm not really quite tall enough. And I never thought to myself, you know what I should do? I should go to the gym to get taller, right? That doesn't make any sense. You don't go to the gym to get taller. That doesn't make sense, right? If you think your brain is like your height, then it doesn't make sense to try harder because you can't change it. But if you know about neuroplasticity and that your brain learns when you put it in challenging situations and gets stronger, then you know your brain is more like a muscle, right? It's not a muscle, it's like a muscle, right? And if I want to get stronger, do I pick up the lightest weight I can find and do this? That won't help, right? I have to pick up something that's hard and do something hard, and that's when it'll change. That's how your brain works. You have to do something challenging to change your brain. If it doesn't challenge you, it can't change you. So you have to be comfortable in that space where drawing is hard for you. It's not your first thing. And take the risk and practice and get better and get help. Because your brain is like a muscle, and if you do the right things, you can help it grow better. If I want to get really good, do I go to the gym by myself or do I go get a trainer? A trainer, because they're experts and tell me how to do a better job. When I'm in school, should I do it by myself? No. I should get help from teachers and tutors and friends and classmates, because help is what smart people do to get better. You get better by getting help. And you know your brain responds to challenge, just like these people learn. So when you think things are really hard, I want you to think of this picture, because I do. I was a little emotional for me. That's my sister. She was born with cerebral palsy, which is a brain disorder. And when she was born, they said she wouldn't be able to walk or talk. Her brain was so damaged. That blank spot, that's missing. That's like a third of her brain that just doesn't exist. And when she had seizures about 2 years ago, so that's the first time we took this picture, and I'd never seen it. They'd always told me about it, but I'd never seen it till this time. And the doctor, the neurologist, said, if that happened to you as an adult, you'd probably be in a coma. But because it happened when she was little, and she did all kinds of things with therapists and physical therapy and mental manipulation and therapy, she now is a functioning adult. If you met her, you probably wouldn't notice she has cerebral palsy. This hand doesn't really work. She stands like this. This leg is 1.5 inches shorter, and she just stands there like this with attitude. And if you argue with her, she will cut you. She's smart. She will whip it. So my whole life I've been trying to argue with this girl, and I realized she's actually at a disadvantage. She's still beating me. It's not even fair. So when you say you're challenged and you can't do things, think about that. She found a way to use different parts of her brain. The part of the brain that you use to read, she doesn't even have that part. But she can read because she trained a different part of her brain to read. Because your brain can change when you do good strategies. She supposedly shouldn't be able to walk or talk, but she has her own business. She's raised 3 kids. She owns a home. Most people who meet her don't even notice because of neuroplasticity. Because your brain is an amazing thing that can do things that those people don't think are possible. So when you're struggling, it's not that it's not hard, it is hard. But hard is where learning happens. So if you get support, that's a good thing. Right? This is one of my students, or was one of my students. His name is Alan. And he dropped out of high school. And then he came back to Fullerton College to finish his degree. And he said gravity brought him back to high school. That was a speech he gave. He said gravity. It was pretty good. What he meant was he was trying to learn everything on his own. But he got stuck on gravity. He couldn't figure out gravity. I would have gotten confused way before gravity. But he decided to come back to school, but he took only math classes and no English classes. Do you know why? He said, I'm just not a writer. So he was at our school for over a year, never took any of his English classes. And they took an English class, and the teacher talked about growth mindset. And it changed Alan's life. And Alan, after dropping out of high school, became a proponent. He went on talking to students about growth mindset. He just got accepted to Stanford University with a national scholarship. There's only 40 in the whole country that pays for his 2 years, gives him $40,000 for 2 years, and then pays $75,000 for his graduate school work. And he said it was because in that class he learned that struggle was where the learning takes place. So he had quit and dropped out of school, and he came back, and after using a growth mindset, he got successfully through all his English classes and got into Stanford University with a full scholarship, a national scholarship. And he says it was because he learned about growth mindset and responded differently. So on the first handout you had, there's a picture at the bottom. You guys see that picture at the bottom? There's a lot of words on there. You can read that later or not, but I just want to look at the picture. At the picture, it talks about the concept of neural density. Sometimes when I tell students that if you learn things, your brain changes, they're like, wait, if I learn too much, is my head going to explode? It's okay. There's room. Because what happens, as you can see in the picture, there's two pictures side by side. The first one has a neuron and then the branches growing off of it. And the one next to it, there's a lot more branches. Does that make sense? So it's neural density. When you learn new things, there are just more branches in the same space. So your head's not going to explode. It's okay. But they did a study with some mice. And they took these mice and they put one group of mice in a cage by themselves with no other toys, no other mice. And the other group of mice, they were in a social environment with lots of toys. And they let them live their whole life. And when they passed away, they weighed their brains. And the mice that had lived all by themselves with no toys, they just ate and slept all day, their brains, compared to the brains of the mice that had environment with social mice, other mice and toys, the social environment mice, their brains weighed 10% more. Their brains weighed 10% more because of neural density, because they learned. The neurons that fired together, wired together, enough to change how much their brains weigh. Because your brain is like a muscle, and it responds to challenge. Struggle is where the learning takes place. So when we talk about helping students, we think about this idea, what I've been talking about is academic mindsets. Because how you approach the problem changes how you face and overcome the problem. And that's your mindset. When you get to something hard, what do you say? Do you say you can't do it, or do you say I don't know how to do it yet? Right? If you have the power of yet, and you know just so you can't do something yet, you're going to face this like you faced other challenges. You're going to get help, and you're going to work smarter, and you're going to get through this. That's a mindset, and that changes everything. It's not that everything won't be hard. Some things are still going to be hard, but how you face the hard is going to be different. So if you turn to your second handout, it should be a really colorful graphic with two brains and then some dots going down. So your second handout. Looks like this one. So this outlines the two mindsets, fixed and growth mindset, and this is based on decades of research, mainly started by a person named Carol Dweck. And if you have a fixed mindset, you avoid challenges because you don't want to look bad. Remember the drawing? You're embarrassed of how people are going to judge you. But if you have a growth mindset, you're like, this is exciting. Challenge is a new thing that's going to help me get better. It's the heavy weight that I'm going to work hard at. It's going to change my brain. Obstacles seem like a good opportunity, right? My daughter is pretty smart, but she's not a genius. But she's pretty smart. And when she was in kindergarten, she was in the first 6 months of the class, and she had 100%. She hadn't missed a single question her whole kindergarten, right? And her teacher was really excited. I said, "Aren't you excited about this?" And I said, "Actually, no, because you didn't ask her anything she didn't know before." If people ask you what you already know, there's no obstacle, no challenge, no growth. Someone has to ask you what you don't know yet so you can really learn, right? And actually, she learned a scary lesson. To me, it was scary. Because right after we had that conversation, the teacher and I, she came home and she got the answer wrong. She got a 97% in kindergarten. Missed one problem. You know what she did? She cried. Because she had already learned that being smart meant knowing the answer. That's what smart was like. That's not what smart means. That means they asked you stuff you learned yesterday. Smart is, you're going to ask me something I don't know yet, and I figured out how to figure it out. I learned how to learn. Right? Now, I thought that was a good story. And I told that like approximately 1 year ago in that room. And my daughter happened to be off from school, and she's a photographer. And she's in high school now. And she was taking pictures. And when I said that story, she said, thorax! She got the question wrong was about the thorax, which is the name of the central body part of an insect. She remembered the question she got wrong in kindergarten because it was such an emotional thing. I didn't know that she remembered that story at all, but a year ago she just jumped out and yelled, thorax! And I was like, whoa. But that's the problem. Sometimes in school we reward people for having the answer. What we need to do is reward people to work towards hard answers. That's what smart means, right? So we want to learn how to learn, not just what to learn. If you learn how to learn, you'll face tomorrow's challenge better, not just solve today's problem. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. So as you can see, there's other changes in how you respond. Criticism. If your teacher gives you feedback, sometimes students are like, oh, my teacher doesn't like me. I want to say, you know what? That person sat up Saturday night and wrote on your paper. They gave you their valuable time. They like you. They're trying to help you. That criticism is meant to be feedback to help you get better. Right? Other people's criticism is not a problem. It's a learning opportunity. Because feedback is how we get better. Right? And when you see other people being successful, this is the last bullet point. That's not a problem. That's exciting because that person knows how to do it and I can learn from them. Other people's success is my opportunity, not my challenge. Right? But if you have a fixed mindset, I don't want to look bad next to them, so them doing well makes me look bad. But with a growth mindset, those are the people that are going to help me get better. So, what we're talking about here is not just a growth mindset, but two other components of belonging and purpose. So growth mindset means believing you can change. Belonging means feeling safe enough to try. Right? If we say it's okay to be wrong, is that scary in a classroom? You want to raise your hand and be wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But most of the time you're afraid, right? You want to be right. Because we think that's like my daughter, we think that's what being smart means. We need to create a space, a learning environment where we know that learning means you have to start with what you don't know yet. And it has to be okay to ask questions, to ask for help. We need to create a community of learners where everyone feels like it's okay to take risks, to draw and try and get better, to not be judged every time. So we want to have a sense of belonging. And lastly, we want to have a sense of purpose. Purpose is really, really important. And we're going to come back to this again. But if something is important to you, and you guys are here on a Friday, so I know you have a purpose. You're trying to get better. But when you get stuck, sometimes it's helpful to go back to that purpose. So it's not, you want to believe that you can change, have a safe space where you belong to try, to take risks, to grow, and then have a big purpose of why you're doing what you're doing. How many of you have been in a classroom where someone in the class said, is this going to be on the final? A couple of you? Yeah. That's kind of a smart student. Because they're saying, I don't want to learn this for me, I want to learn it because you're going to put it on the test. Right? That's what they're saying. They don't have a purpose for what they're doing. And it seems hard and boring. But if that person had a purpose, they would do the same thing and they would do it on their own. Right? And they wouldn't have flashcards in the hallway trying to memorize it because stuff you really learn for yourself, you don't have flashcards. Right? So we want to find that purpose. I'm going to come back to those three things. So we talked briefly about the power of yet. That's when you're struggling, what do you do? The power of yet. So this is an idea that I want you to think about. Maybe even write it down if that's helpful for you to learn. Effort plus good strategies plus help from others is intelligent practice. Effort plus good strategies plus help from others. That's what we're trying for. How do we get better? We get help from other people. We get new strategies. With the drawing, it was when my friend's son taught her to use the lines to frame the face. That's a strategy that someone else taught them. So that's what we're trying to do. Not just work harder, but work smarter. Right? So before you get to that, you have this handout right here. It says Student End of Semester Reflection. So it's the next one after the docs. So there's lots of words on it. I think it's So don't find that one? That's a lot of words. I'm not going to make you read all of it. But this was a student who at the end of the year, after learning from their teacher and about growth mindset, wrote this paper. And so I just want to look at this last paragraph. So a student wrote this to their teacher. If I could take a second to show you the first sentence. I think this is a good example a lot of us have. My history with literacy has been a long one and not a good one. This person came into school and found it really hard. Partly because he has dyslexia. His brain processes numbers differently and words differently. So now let's look at the bottom. This is at the end of the semester. He wrote, my relationship with literacy has always been a struggle. But with the help of my teachers that have been there to provide me with support and ways of kicking my inner critic to the curb with free writing, to exercising my brain with growth mindset in order to improve my reading and writing, all this has led me to working with my dyslexia instead of letting it hindering my success and help me improve my relationship with literacy. So in there he talked about that kicking the critic to the curb. Have you guys ever tried to write and then you just get stuck? You're staring at it, you've got writer's block, you can't think of the next thing to write. Has that ever happened to you? Yes. Yeah, that happens to everybody, right? So their teacher gave them a strategy. She said, I want you to get into a writing mode where you kick your inner critic to the curb. When you're writing something, you know that little voice in your head says, that's not good, or that doesn't make sense. You guys heard that voice? Yeah. I want you to tell that voice to be quiet for a few minutes. You're going to kick it out of the room. Right? Kick it to the curb. And just let your free write. Just go, go, go. And be creative. Draw, play. Get stuff down on paper. And that changed this student's ability to write. Because they have dyslexia, so they're always worried about misspelling words and things. And so they couldn't be creative because they're always judging. So this student used that strategy, kicking my inner critic to the curb, to change. That's what effort plus good strategies plus help from others looks like. And this person has a learning disability, a learning challenge, and now they're successful in this class and think about their situation differently because they have a growth mindset, and they got help, and now they're successful. And they passed this class and moved on to the next class. And they've struggled with this their whole life. Does that make sense? Yeah. Excellent. So, next, you have a paper that looks just like this one. So, I want to teach you another fancy word. First fancy word I taught you was neuroplasticity, right? That's how your brain physically changes. Second fancy word is called metacognition. Metacognition. Cognition is how you think. It means cognition means thinking. Meta means doing something about itself. So metacognition is thinking about your thinking to improve your thinking. Thinking about your thinking to improve your thinking. That's funny, right? It's hard. But think about this. You think in one way. When you encounter a problem, you try and solve it the way you tried last time. Everybody does this. But if you stop and think about it, there's usually other ways to solve the problem. And when you think about how you could change the way you think, you get to think better. You basically have habits of mind, ways you always approach the problem. Here's a simple way to think about this. I would be confident that all of you put the same shoe on first every day. If you stop and think about it, you probably put the same shoe on first. Yeah. A couple people are saying no. How about when you brush your teeth? You probably start in the same part of your mouth every day.
Yes.
Yes, most people do. That's good, because if you had to stop every second of getting ready in the morning, like, which shoe should I put on first today? You would still be getting dressed. That's a good coping mechanism. But our brains like to do that all the time. So you come to a complex problem, and you do it the same way every time. Does that make sense? You have a habit of doing it. But like all habits, you can change them. You're in charge of those. They're not easy to change. It takes intention and effort, but you can change them. You can change the habits of your mind. Remember, you can grow new pathways. You can make new connections you didn't have before. So when you get to something hard, you have control of how your brain responds. That's what that sheet's about right there. It's called The Habits of Mind, and it's based on extensive research, and they outline 16 of them. That's a lot. I don't want to talk about 16 right now. That takes too long. But I highlighted 6. So let's look at a couple of the ones that are highlighted, okay? The first one is maybe the most important one, and it's persisting. That means not giving up. When something's hard, you stick with it. You don't keep doing the same thing over and over, but you get help. So here's an example where persisting is not good. I learned to water ski really late. I met my wife and everyone in her family water ski. That's where you pull behind the boat, right, on the water. And I don't like not being good at things. And they were all good at it. They've been doing it their whole life. And I'm 20-something, 27 years old. And I'm trying, and I fall down a lot. And I decide that, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to hold on to the rope. And then when I fall, I still held on to the rope. There's no way I'm going to get back up in water ski. I'm just bouncing around behind the boat like this with my head in the water. Persisting in that situation would not be smart. What I needed to do, and what we did, is I went over to the ski school, I got one lesson, and I learned how to water ski. Right? So persisting by itself isn't enough, but it's important. You can't make progress without it, but by itself it's not enough. You can't quit if you want to get better, but you shouldn't keep doing the same thing if it's not working. Get help from other people, right? So that means, number 2, managing impulsivity. This is how you keep yourself from reacting quickly, from overreacting, from shouting out. Right? You guys are all doing that because none of you guys told me you've been talking too long. Be quiet. Even if you were thinking, you didn't say it. Right? Managing impulsivity. The next one's really good for collaborative work, listening with empathy and understanding. Sometimes, not you guys, sometimes when people are talking to each other, what they're really doing is thinking about what they're going to say next. And not listening to what the other person has to say, because I have some really good stuff. As soon as they shut up, I get to talk. Right? That is not listening with empathy and understanding. But that's a habit. You've learned that way, and you could learn to listen better. And that'll help you in your relationships, in your learning, right? This is my favorite probably, thinking flexibly. And we're going to do some things about this as we get forward here. Thinking about different ways to solve the same problem, right? Thinking about different ways to solve the same problem. Questioning and problem posing means you're going to ask questions, not just solve them. You're not waiting for the teacher to give you a problem that you answer. You're going to be thinking, what's a good way to think about this? How might I use this in my everyday life? If you learn in your classes for how is this going to affect me, you're not going to ask, is this going to be on the test? Because your test isn't the one you take in class with a Scantron. It's when you walk outside the class and how you live your life. Right? If you're asking, how is this going to help me? You don't need to be tested on it because you're using it. Right? That's one way to get purpose. Because we should be getting things in school that are helping us outside of school. Right? So can we pose questions to learn better? And the last one I want is taking responsible risks. That means in a safe environment, being willing to try things that I might not be good at yet. Being willing to try things I might not be good at yet, because nobody's good at things first. Everything is hard before it's easy. Anything you can do now used to be hard for you. So you have to be willing to take the risk to fail for now, to learn from that failure, because it's only failure when you stop. If you're doing something not successful, it's not failure until you decide, that's it, I quit. If you try something and don't succeed and keep back trying, you haven't failed at all. You just learned. That's what learning looks like. So those are 6. Does that make sense? Okay. To try the drawing exercise again. But before you do, I want you to pick one of those 6 that you're going to focus on. You're going to think about while you're doing it. So look at the list of 6 again. Pick one. I mean, maybe you could do persisting because you're going to keep trying. But maybe you could pick a different one. Could you use one of those 6 habits when you get a second chance? So everyone try and pick one that you're going to use. Okay. Now, give back the paper that you had before. So you got the other person's paper back. Everyone should have the paper you already drew on. We're going to take a responsible risk here. We're going to try again with persisting. Right? Maybe think about a new way, flexible way to try it. Maybe you try use the frame the face. Does anyone else have a drawing trick you like? Strategy you use to draw? Glasses trick, yeah.
Fearless.
Fearless, I love it. Be fearless. Lean into this. Let's try it. Some people think that they can draw easier if they do little short sketch marks, right? Instead of like trying to draw a big circle, they do the little sketches and that helps them. Some people want to step back and do the big picture. Some people like say, let's start with the eye. So think about a strategy. Try and draw it differently than you did last time. However you started last time, start a different way. Think flexibly. Right? Okay? Everyone has someone's paper? Another one. Okay. Here we go. 30 seconds. Be fearless. Go. Fifteen more fearless seconds. Okay. Come to a gentle pause, a stopping place. All right. Give it back to the person again. No judgment, though. Don't feel bad about it. You're learning. Learning means trying. Doesn't mean winning. One of the things I like about this exercise is all the smiling. I like all the smiling. Is somebody willing to share what they thought about? Not your drawing. I'm not asking you to show everyone your drawing if you don't want to. But what was your thought strategy? What habit were you trying? How did it work for you? Anybody want to share for us? Yes. Okay, so she chose managing impulsivity. And how did that go for you? Okay, so you slowed yourself down a little less, like concern and nervousness, and paid attention to details. And do you like the outcome? Did it help you? Excellent. She feels good about it. Let's give her a round of applause. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for sharing. Did you want to share also? Yeah? Which one did you try?
Thank you. I chose number 4, BP flexibility. And last time I choose my left hand to draw.
Wow.
It's the second time. And this is the first time. And this is the second time I use my left hand.
Wow, the second time looks really good. You guys see us? Give a round of applause. So that's really good. Someone else want to share? Somebody on this side maybe? Yep.
For myself, I choose to persisting and managing impulsivity.
Persisting and managing impulsivity.
Persisting because I want to show a good example. I want to show a good example for my son, and he'll be proud that his mother succeed no matter what people say or people thought about her mom, his mom. That he's proud to have his mom around.
A minute ago we were talking about purpose, right? That's a purpose, right? A long-term goal about helping inspire your kids. That's a purpose. When we face challenge and we think like it's hard, that kind of thing is always going to get you through. So that was really good. So let's step back and think about what we've done so far. Let's recap. We had the complicated idea of neural plasticity, which is that the neurons that fire together wire together and you change your brain. And when you know that your brain physically changes, it makes it easier to change your mindset. Because you know that your brain is like a muscle, and you have to challenge it if you want to change it. And then once you know you can change your brain and your habits, you have more control in your learning. Because you could work on these and get better at them. You're probably really good at some of them, but other ones you're not good at yet. And when you try and get better, you know about intelligent practice, which is effort, plus good strategies, plus help from others. Because metacognition, that second big word, is thinking about your thinking to improve your thinking. Because the way you think today is a way of thinking, and tomorrow you could have a better way of thinking. Because you get to make that choice. Right? All right. I think we're going to skip ahead 2 slides, actually. Oh, there we go. Okay. So, here's another concept that might be helpful. And I heard a couple people talk about this. Sometimes we get stressed out. Maybe just me, not you guys. You never get stressed out. I get stressed out. Lots of people do, actually. And one thing that can help you, and what Fullerton College has been doing for the last several years, we've been trying to talk about mindfulness as well as growth mindset. And we call it mindful growth. Mindful growth. You have a lot of control of how your brain works, and one thing you can do is be more mindful. And you have a handout on this one as well. It looks like this. It says mindfulness at the top, has a stop sign on it. Okay? So this is Dr. Jon Kabat-Zinn, and for many people, he's considered the expert who brought mindfulness to Western culture like the United States. Mindfulness is ancient practice. It's been around for thousands of years. But what he did that people in the United States and others really liked is he tested its ability to help people in rigorous studies. He started with people who had chronic pain, and medicine wasn't helping, nothing was helping these people. And he had them do mindfulness practices for 8 weeks. And at the end of 8 weeks, he was able to show those people felt better about their lives. They experienced pain less. So drugs, other things didn't work. This helped people. And that study's been replicated, so now all around the country and in Europe, they use his practices. And increasingly in education, we're starting to help young people and students, returning adult students, learn how to be mindful. And it's another kind of a habit of mind. So the first thing we could talk about is the definition, which you have on your paper as well. This is Jon Kabat-Zinn's definition. Mindfulness is the awareness that emerges through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally to the unfolding experience moment by moment. That's a long way of saying it's taking account of what you're feeling while you're feeling it and not judging. Taking a moment to reflect on how you feel, but don't judge it, just observe it. And mindfulness is a really important habit. It's about training your brain, building that neural pathway to change how you respond. Some people have a tendency to react. Maybe someone in your family does something that every time they do it, just like, you just get really angry immediately. Maybe it's like the way your sister chews cereal at the breakfast table, right? And just that crunchy noise, just get so angry right away, right? What happens there is you've gotten that habit, you built that pathway where you immediately jump from stimulus to reaction, right? But what mindfulness helps you do is build a space in between there, where you get to have control. Because if you're reacting, you're out of control, you're not in control. This is where you get to build that response instead of a reaction. You get to change that habit. That's what mindfulness does. So I'm going to have us watch this quick video, which I think that Dan Harris does a really good job on this one. Okay, can we pause for just a second? So I'm going to give you a little play-by-play. He's saying that mindfulness is a superpower that you have possession of, and it's how you start to take control of your reactions. And then he said, imagine if someone cut you off in traffic. So close your eyes for a second. Now imagine that. You're pretty angry right now, aren't you? And of course, you've never cut anyone else off. It's always those other people that do that, right? So you're really angry right now, right? And he's going to go through our typical response and then a mindfulness response. Okay, go ahead. Okay, so stop again. So he said, how do you feel? And he said, you probably say something like, I'm pissed. And then immediately you start to inhabit that. And you like really, you are. Like, it's not just a feeling you're having, it's what you are. That jump from having a feeling to becoming the feeling. Losing control, right? I heard from the laughter, some of you recognize that, right? Okay, now he's gonna ask him, what would happen if it was different? Okay. Okay, so let's pause for a second. So did you see the chest buzzing and his ears turning red? Because what you actually start to notice with mindfulness is how you start to respond in your body. When you become mindful, you start to see where your emotions are. Yes? I'm off. Thank you. Is that better? Thank you. So what happens is, with mindfulness, you start to pause and observe, and you start to notice where you feel it. I feel my anger right there. I was like, oh, I get that one. Some people, it's in their stomach. Some people, it's like they start to sweat. But your body has biological responses. And mindfulness is where you start to get control back from your body. You want to put your brain in charge, and the right part of your brain. So being aware, like if I start to feel the tension here in a relationship, a conversation, I know I'm about to get angry and I have to take control. If otherwise, it's going to spiral, right? But now being mindful, I've learned better mechanisms for that. Okay? So then he said, after he ran out and said your kid's laughing at you because you're totally lost control, right? Road rage kind of thing. And he says, he's going to come and ask him, is there another way? Okay. Okay, 1 second. So he says, the angry guy, don't I have a right to be angry? And the calm guy in the sweater vest says, yes, sometimes, but probably not as often as you think. Right? That guy cutting you off probably wasn't that big a deal in your life. And then the idea isn't that you become a shapeless blob, never responding to anything, but rather that you start to take control and choose when it's appropriate to respond in certain ways. So it's not become useless, non-actor, but that there's a way in between. Okay, we can stop there. So he asked, how do you get to be more mindful? And his answer is meditation. And it doesn't have to be elaborate on top of mountaintops for months at a time meditation. Biology and science has shown small efforts make big improvements. You build new neural pathways. We can watch your brain change with small efforts. Meditation. And he said, meditation is going to become, he predicts, like physical exercise. And then it went to black and white. You guys saw that? And he said, imagine if you said you were going to run in the 40s, 1940s. And the other guy said, who's chasing you? Because nobody went up just to run in the 1940s. It was scientists who came in and showed how that was really good for your health to get exercise. And now people exercise. And his prediction is that mindfulness will be like that. Soon it'll be like, why aren't you doing it? Because we know it helps. That's what he's trying to say here with this image. Okay. Those are the scientists. All right, we can stop there. And his point here is, with jumping, is it'll be like brushing your teeth, eating healthy foods, and taking the medications your doctors prescribe. That mindfulness is going to be like that. It's going to be about exercise, about basic hygiene. It's something you should do because we know it's good for you. Okay? Okay. So what he said there is, mindfulness is not going to make everything rainbows and unicorns in your life. It's not going to solve all your problems. But it is going to help you respond to the challenges better. And that is a superpower. That's what Dan Harris is saying in that little skit. Right? That you have the ability to control how you respond and react. How many of you have had road rage? Some of you, yeah. I used to have that. I still do sometimes. But it helps you control. How many of you felt like really stressed out? Everybody, right? Stress is a good thing by itself because stress is part of that struggle, right? You can't learn without stress. It has to be a little, but then it can get to be too much. You see the bottom of your page right here? This is from a different guy. His name is he's a UCLA professor named Daniel Siegel. This is a really useful idea. It's a really simple way to think about your brain. Why don't you go like this? Everyone got their hand up like this. Now fold your thumb in like this, and then fold your fingers over this way. This is Dan Siegel. He's an expert brain researcher. Simple way to explain the brain to people like me, and I really like this one. So go ahead and open it back up. Okay, this is your spinal cord, right? Goes down your back. All your nerves for everything in your body go through this little space right here. This, your thumb right here, fold it in. That's the oldest part of your brain, the limbic system. This is where something called the amygdala is. But what you need to know is that all animals have this. And this is where fight and flight come from. Right? So when your ancestors, long time ago, were walking through the jungle, and they heard something rustling in the bushes and maybe saw something on the ground, they were sure it was either a snake, right, that was going to kill them. So they either had to get ready to fight or to run away. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And that's the oldest part of the brain. All animals have it. Fight or flight is right there. Now fold your fingers down. This is the mammalian brain. Mammals have this, and humans have it the most. It's the cerebral cortex. It's that curly stuff on the outside of that little brain that we passed around. That's where your thinking is. This is what makes humans so capable of thought, is this piece. Most animals don't have it. Does that make sense? Here's what happens though. When you experience stress, you flip your lid. And this part of your brain takes over. When you get stressed out, the brain releases all the chemicals and this part of your brain shuts down. Your thinking brain is done. Because your thinking brain is going to be sitting there going like, well, maybe it's a snake, maybe it is. Like, get out of here. Run away. Like, stop asking dumb questions. That's not the time for that. Basically, you have no control. It's a biological response to stress. But the problem is, we evolved to avoid snakes in the grass, and now we're taking tests in class. And our brain still can react the same way. You over your brain like, oh my God, I'm kidding, and your stress level goes up and you can't think at all, right? Ever been there? That's one of the things mindfulness does. It trains your brain to not flip out as often, and when you do flip out, you get back in control sooner. Remember the guy in the car got cut off? He went right there, right? Lost it, no more control. Calmness allows him to be like, whatever, I was sitting in traffic anyway, where was I gonna go? Right? It's that ability to change the response from a reaction, and it's biological. So learning some simple meditation techniques can really help. Maybe you're really stressed right before you take a test. Does that ever happen? You're sitting there at a test, it's like, right? That fast breathing is already a sign that your biological clock is escalating, right? So on the bottom, in the middle of that page, there's a simple process called stop. This is a really simple technique. You just stop what you're doing. Do nothing for a second. Right? Seriously, go ahead right now. Take a real big breath. Observe how you feel. Where is that breath happening? Is it happening in your nose? Do you feel it most there? Or do you feel it most in your diaphragm? Where is that breath happening in your body? Right? Observe how you feel. Are you feeling anxious about the test? Are you feeling angry because your pencil broke? Like, how do you feel? Now the key here is don't judge it. Don't be like, you're stupid for being angry. No. That's just adding another emotion. Right? And then, after that, you can proceed with whatever you're doing. So your breathing is really interesting because it does two things here. I mean, lots of things. One of them keeps you alive, right? Okay. But when you get stressed out, how's your breathing change? It gets like faster, right? Usually, right? Because that's your body trying to get all the oxygen because you're going to run away, right? So your body uses the breath to get ready for it, but you also can use the breath to control it. That's why when they're stressed out, they say take calm breaths. Calm down, take some deep breaths, because that changes the physiological response of your body. So you have some control. If you control your breathing, you're starting to control your body. Okay? So that's a simple one. Stop. My student ambassadors do one they call 2 feet and a breath, which I think they're going to talk about later today, so I'm not going to use that one, but they teach it to their classmates when they're getting ready to take a test or something. On the back side of that handout, there's another strategy called 3 good things. This is a more long-term one. I'm just going to tell you about it right now really quickly. It's a strategy to help be more grateful, have more gratitude by appreciating good things in your day. And all of these strategies are based in science. People have tested them. So you just know that you have that resource for later. Okay. Last thing we want to talk about was purpose. Right? What is the purpose of education? So I'm going to give you another chance to draw. I want you to draw me what the purpose of education looks like. Before we do that, I want to tell you a little bit about why I think this is a good question. Often in school, we spend a lot of time solving for X, right, in your math class? Yeah. But we don't really ask why. Why? When am I going to use this? When am I going to use this? So, are you guys aware that every department of the U.S. government has a seal? Right? When the president gets behind a podium, there's a seal. That's a picture of the seal of the U.S. Department of Education. And it's based in an amazingly beautiful metaphor. It says that every student is like an acorn, a tiny little acorn. See that picture at the bottom, the acorn? Yeah. And an acorn's purpose in life, the reason it exists, is to grow into a mighty and majestic oak tree that can live for hundreds of years from that tiny little thing. And that's beautiful, because that says the education department is going to shepherd that tiny little kindergartner into class and nurture them and help them grow to their full and majestic potential, and it'll be amazing. But when I ask my students, they say that's not what school usually feels like. When I ask them what it feels like, they say something more like this. That the student feels like a little bucket, and the teacher is a bigger pitcher of water, and the teacher pours information. The water is information, stuff that's going to be on the test. And the student's job is to catch the water. And if they're a good student, they hold on to it until the test. If they're a bad student, they're like a leaky bucket, and they don't catch any of the water. And then when that class is over, dump it out, do it again. And notice the cup didn't change. Not from the acorn to the oak tree, just a full or empty bucket. Does that make sense? They say that's what school feels like. And that's what we say we're going to do in the seal. What I want you to do right now is try and think about and sketch what you want school to be like. So I'm saying what the government says it could be, but maybe doesn't do. I give you the second picture, what it seems like more like what we really do. What I want you to do right now is draw, sketch, picture. What's the best form of education in your opinion? Go ahead. Okay. So I'm sure you could do more if you had more time. I just wanted to have a kind of a conversation about this because what I think is interesting when I talk with people about this, for most of my students who are 18, 19, 20 years old, and even many of you, the thing they've done most in their life while they've been awake is sit in school, right? And when you ask them, why are you doing it? They don't have a good answer. We spend all our time doing it, but we don't ask, why are we doing it? What am I trying to do? You have a good answer, right? You said you were trying to inspire and model for your kids. That's a good answer. But think how much we spend doing it and how little time we ask why. Ideally, if you spend most of your time doing something, you should have a very clear purpose. What if we were driving down the street, and I'm driving, and you're in the passenger seat, and you say turn left. I'm like, okay, so I turn left. And then I say, where are we going? You're like, I don't know. Why did I turn left? How do I know if I'm getting closer to my goal if I don't know what my goal is? Now, obviously, you're going to get a diploma, certificate, but is that all you're going to get? Are you going to let other people tell you if you're being successful? If I set a goal, I can tell if I'm getting closer today, not at the end of the semester when I get a grade. Am I using what I'm learning in ways that matter to me? So I'm going to invite you, not just now, but to really come up with a good answer to that question. So if someone asks you, what is the purpose of education? You'd be like, I got my answers. And I'm not telling you what the answer is, because it's not my answer. But you should have one, because you're spending a lot of time and money doing it, right? So I gave that challenge to my students. And one student painted that. She had 48 hours. Most people just do a little sketch, but she's an awesome artist, and she painted it. But the painting of it isn't the best part, because what I have my students do is explain it. And she explained that it's on the top of a mountain, because you have to climb up and work hard to get there. And she used that tree metaphor, but she played with it a little. You can see there's a desk there, because you got to do a lot of hard work to be successful. So that's what a desk represents. And there's a little apple. Can you see the apple? Yeah. That's because sometimes it helps to suck up to your teacher, she said. So I thought that was funny. And then on the tree, she's got a bunch of words, because we studied Plato in my class, and we looked at the allegory of the cave, and we talked about inquiry and asking questions, and so you may not have noticed yet, but the branches of the tree actually spell out the word knowledge. You can look over here, the E is the easiest, and then the G, and then the D. So it says knowledge in the branch of the tree. And she explained that, and she said, just like the branches of a tree aren't there for their own sake, the branches of the tree are to help provide the shade, the leaves that give shade and fruit and service to other people. And the purpose of your education is not for you, but you get knowledge so that you can serve other people in your community. That is a good definition of the purpose of education, right? And she came up with it and drew a version of it in 48 hours. But no one had asked her that question before. And so what I'm inviting you to do is be a problem poser, right? Remember that was one of our habits of mind? Start asking questions. Don't wait for other people so you can answer them. Right? Learning how to learn means learning to ask good questions. So I give you an example of doing something with a purpose. So in my class, my students have to write research papers. We learned in our class about the problem of food insecurity. That a lot of people in community college don't have enough food to eat. And so my students decided to use their research to make a difference. So everybody in those pictures did something with their research. One group, the first group in the top corner, they, by those 6 or 7 students, raised enough to create 80 baskets for Christmas food donations for 80 different families. Just that one group. Other groups wanted to make sure everyone on campus learned about our food bank. So they petitioned, and now all the campus, they're working on putting on every syllabi. Every teacher tells you where the food bank is and how to get help. Another one found out that our food bank didn't have a refrigerator, so they couldn't have any fresh food. So they raised money and donated a refrigerator to the food bank, so now the food bank can give fresh fruits and vegetables to people. The point is, they used what they were learning to change things outside of their class, right? And that's what I'm suggesting you can do. So we talked about growth mindset, the belief that you can change, belonging, having a safe space to take responsible risk, and having a purpose. And that brings me to the concept of flow. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this concept. It's really important. Flow. His name is Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, which you'll never have to know because it's really hard to say. But he came up with the idea of flow. If you do something over and over and it's really easy, like you're playing a game and you beat it in the first 30 seconds 3 or 4 times, what are you going to do? You're going to keep playing? You're going to quit because it's boring, right? What if you try something several times and it's hard? You lose right away, lose right away, lose right away. What are you going to do? You're going to quit because it's hard, right? Yeah? No? You're going to keep going? Okay. All right. But flow is in the space in between those two things. It's when something is just hard enough. When your skills and your resources are ideally matched to the challenge. That's the ideal. And it actually changes your brain. We can watch people enter the flow and their brain changes. Right? So, do any of you guys play video games? Family members who play video games? Some of you? Okay. All right. Some people who play video games get stuck playing them for a really long time. And then some people's wife comes and says, you've been playing the game for 4 hours. And then some people say to their wife, no, I just started. And they say, it's 4 a.m. Are you crazy? And you realize it is 4 a.m. I mean, some people realize it is 4 a.m. And you have been playing for a long time. And video games do that by design. Video games understand flow, and they're made for it. If you play a game, at first it's easy, right? And they teach you how to use the tools in the game, and then the game gets harder, right? And then you have to work to beat that level, and then what happens? The game gets harder. They build the game so that the skills and resources and challenge adapt. And that's why people can play a game for 4 hours and not know. One of the signs of flow is that you lose track of time. If you watch sports and you listen to an interview after someone had their greatest game of their life, often they'll say, it just seemed like everything was in slow motion. It just seemed like I was in the zone. You ever heard that? That's flow. Their skills and resources ideally match the challenge. That's the best learning environment of all. That's what we need to strive for, where our skills and resources match the challenge. That's what learning looks like. It's the struggle with the support. It's not working hard, it's getting help. It's that student in that class whose teacher taught them about the inner critic. They'd struggled their whole life. It wasn't until they got help and a growth mindset that they got better. So quickly, I'm going to tell you about a concept called growth mountain, and you have a handout with this on it. Can I hold this up for just a second? Looks like this. This is a representation of flow. On the first side, it's this gradual thing, and it's called relaxation ridge. And the person's laying back like this, just totally relaxed. That's when your teacher asks you the stuff you already knew. 2 + 2, 4. Got this, easy, right? And there's no learning in relaxation ridge. And then there's growth peak. That's that moment at the top where everything's going great. That's flow. That's where your challenge and your resources match. But then the next side is panic cliff. You see that part? That's where it got too scary. That's where you flipped your lid. It got too scary. You're not learning anymore. But I like the drawing that my friend did because it's got 2 people. Sometimes you're the person hanging for your life going, please help me. And sometimes you're the person saying, I got you. That's what belonging looks like. That's when a community of people work together, because everybody sometimes is the person who needs a hand up, and sometimes you're the person who can give the hand. And if you have a growth mindset, you know that, and you want to help other people so you can get help too. That's what belonging looks like. You create a learning environment where struggle is part of the learning process, and we support each other. Because everybody sees themselves at the top of the mountain. Right? Growth peak. But what people don't always see is all the things it takes to get up there. It's not enough to have a big goal, you have to have a plan. You have to have a way to get there, and you have to have a team. Nobody climbs Mount Everest by themselves. Everybody has a team. And that's what you need to have, a belonging, a community, a space where you have the people who are going to help you up. So let me tell you a little bit about my uncle. My uncle one time when I was visiting a family reunion, he said, I want to show you slides of my summer vacation. I was like, oh, it's going to be so boring. And he started showing pictures, and in the pictures, he's in Kathmandu. And then he's at the base camp of Mount Everest. I didn't even know this. My uncle climbed Mount Everest. That was really interesting. I want to watch the slides again. That was cool. Except he didn't climb Mount Everest. He made it all the way to the second last camp, and then he didn't make it to the top. So one way to tell that story is that my uncle failed to climb Mount Everest, right? He's a failure. Or you found out the reason he didn't make it is he saved 2 people's lives instead. The last night you only get one try. You have to wait. There's a big line of people trying to climb Mount Everest. And so he wakes up at 4 in the morning. He climbs up and he starts to hear in the night, in the darkness still, he hears what he thinks are voices. But he and his climbing partner decided to keep going. And they hear the voices again and they decide to keep going. Because this is their one chance, their whole life. They've been working towards this one thing. And then they're sure that there are voices. So they go off the path. And they find 2 climbers who got trapped from the night before. One of them went blind. His cold got to his eyes and he went blind. And his partner stayed with him. So the 2 of them were out in the dark all night. And my uncle and his partner found them, picked them up, and carried them back down the mountain. Yeah. So, yeah, he didn't climb Mount Everest. He just saved 2 people's lives, right? So if you want to talk about purpose and goals and achieving your goals or not, sometimes the things that seem like setbacks are not setbacks, right? Well, let's skip that part. Okay, so let me tell you about me. So I went to school, and I said I'm going to go to graduate school. So I applied to all those schools up there. UCLA, Penn State, USC, Notre Dame, Harvard, Duke, Washington, Indiana University, and Tulane. And I got rejected by all those schools, except for Alabama. You see Alabama in the corner? They let me in. So I flew to Alabama for a weekend to see if I wanted to go to school in Alabama. I did not. Me and Alabama, we don't have a lot in common. I did not want to go to school in Alabama. So I took a year and I said, I'm going to come next year. I took a year off. And I did a bunch of things. And I called some of those schools and I said, okay, you rejected me this time. What should I do to do better next time? Right? And the next time around, I applied to almost all the same schools, but this time I got into 6 of them. So they rejected me one year, and the next year, after finding what to do differently, I got help. They told me to take a class at a UC class. They told me to take my tests again to get my GRE score, which is like the SAT, graduate school SAT, up. And they told me to change some samples. And they told me, actually, this is an interesting story, that I had a bad letter of recommendation. Yeah, which I was surprised, but one person wrote me not a good letter. So I took that person's letter out because I figured it out. And so I applied again, right? And I got it. And then I called the school and I said, okay, this school, University of Washington, wants to give me this much money. And they say, oh yeah, we'll give you this much money. And then I called Washington back and said, okay, now they're going to give me this much money. And they're giving me this much money. So I went from rejection to how much do you want to pay me to go to school, right? And I tell you that because I could have given up. I could have said, you know what, I'm not going to go to graduate school. I'm going to go and be a lawyer. I'm going to do something else. But I had a passion and a dream, and I kept going when I failed. And then I got to go to Indiana University. They gave me the most money. And I was there, and it was going well. And I passed my qualifying exams, and all I have to do now, this is it, just write a book, that's all, for my dissertation. But I came out here, moved back to California from Indiana. I had kids, I got a full-time job, and I never finished. So again, maybe it's a failure. I didn't finish. But because I didn't finish that PhD, I just went back to school at UCLA. I learned about growth mindset for my son. And now I go around talking to people about this, and we've trained over 300 or 400 teachers and helped maybe 100,000 students. So it's because I failed at Indiana that I was able to do the things that I was able to do for UCLA. That's why I'm here today, right? So, thank you. So when people say, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? You guys sometimes don't hear enough, but that's a question you're familiar with, right? People often say, I want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher or a profession of some kind, right? But that's not what you be, that's what you do. What you want to think about is, who do you want to be? So, who are you going to help? That's the question you should ask. Who are you going to help while you grow? Because you're not going to get there anyway. It's not the top of the mountain because there's always another mountain. You're going to be going the whole time, so you should be growing the whole time, and you should be helping other people the whole time. That's what your question should be, is how are you going to grow and how you can help other people? Because it's only failure when we stop, right? It's only failure when we stop. I failed multiple times, and I'm not done, right? So I hope that you'll take that same approach. Just quietly look at that picture for a second. Won't say anything. Okay. How many people see a rabbit? Raise your hand if you see a rabbit. Raise your hand if you see a duck. Okay. If you see a duck, it's because you're looking at it this way. And the beak is right here, its eye is right here, and this is the back of its head. But if you turn around, it's a bunny, because here's the nose, here's the eye, and these are the bunny ears, right? Changing the way you think changes what you see. If you saw one thing and stopped, that's a habit that we've developed. When we have an answer, we think we have the answer. And thinking flexibly means pushing past our first ideas towards our better ideas. That's what we're trying to train ourselves to do. To think better, to think critically, to not accept the first answers, because your first answer is almost never your best answer unless you make the mistake of making it your last answer. Right? You keep thinking, you get better. So, I want to show you how hard walking is. These are multi-million-dollar robots paid for by the Department of Defense, and they will not be able to walk. Remember, they cost a lot of money, and they can't do it. All right, so we could probably stop that. So, those are multi-million-dollar robots, and they can't walk, because walking is hard. This should be the last handout that you have in your packet for me. So if you get that last handout. I'm going to try and recap some of the stuff we did for you guys. It should look like this. So we remind ourselves that a setback is a setup for a comeback. Things that seem like they didn't go well can turn out to something better. I failed at Indiana, completing my doctorate, and then I got a different one, right? So that's the approach that a growth mindset takes. Obstacles can be opportunities, and the struggle is where the learning takes place. So this handout, I'm conflicted about. Because this handout represents like 5 years of my life. And I can't decide if it's a good idea or a good thing to have 5 years of your life on a one-page handout about it. That seems like not very much for 5 years. But it's a good way to summarize what we talked about, okay? So let's go back. We said that a growth mindset means believing you can change your intelligence. And you know you can do that because that big fancy word, neuroplasticity. You know that your brain changes when you learn new things. And once you know that you can change, it's important to think about how. What choices am I making? And that's about habits of mind and intelligent practice. Because I know the neurons that fire together wire together, so I can make new habits. I can approach problems with intelligent practice, which is effort, plus good strategies, plus help from other people. Sometimes I need to help other people up, and sometimes I'm the one who needs help. At the bottom of the page it says productive struggle plus intelligent practice equals success. Productive struggle plus intelligent practice equals success. That's where you engage in challenging things, you get help, and you achieve good outcomes. Right? And then you look at the little pictures at the bottom. Everyone see those? I've put the mic down. I was trying to talk loud now. So that little picture is to show you that walking is hard, but you all learned that. You walked into this room. Nothing you have to learn in school is harder than learning to walk. I guarantee it. You saw those $1 million robots can't do it. Your brain has to process so much information, coordinate so many muscles, and keep track. But you learn how to do that. Because how do little babies learn how to walk? They try and they fall and they get up and try. Because they know it's only failure when you stop. Because otherwise it's feedback, because that's what your brain uses to learn. So maybe the next time they try holding on to something, or they keep their arms out, or they try different things, right? Because as far as I can tell, this never happened. No baby was ever walking and then went, go on without me. I'm just not a walker. They all got up and they learned to walk, and you did that. And that means you could learn anything in school. Because nothing you learn in school is harder than learning how to walk. But you have to have help. You have to have good strategies. And then you see in the pictures that you learn to walk. And then you learn to run. And then you learn there are things like bicycles and skis and all kinds of other things that you've never even thought of. Because that's what learning looks like. So if you want to have a growth mindset, a safe space to do it, and a purpose of why you're doing it, and you can achieve all kinds of things. Thank you.